So we often film a lot of cars on the dyno, especially new engines that have been run in and then power tuned. But a lot of the time we never actually show what goes on to that point to get it to where you are tuning it. So today I thought we'd have a good look at a car, a beautiful Mazda here at Promaz, and have a look at what goes on to setting up not only the engine, the EFI, everything.
Yeah, so basically just going to give you a little insight to some tuning tricks and some stuff that Fueltech have got as really good features, safety features and stuff like that. So we'll take you through all them.
So the car today we've got is an absolute ripper, Simon. You'd probably call this a high-end rotary street car, wouldn't you? It's really front to back build.
Yeah, it's a front to back build. A lot of people are doing these sort of builds these days. You know, they want everything right. I think this gentleman's owned this car for like 20 odd years, and it was a PP previously, just a 13B PP. And then he stripped it all back. We've put one of our Cosmo 13B turbo packages. It's running a Garrett G42 1450. It's got all the turbo smart gear, wastegates, blow-off valves, the Fueltech FT600. It's got a Samsonite 6-speed sequential gearbox.
Yeah. For reliability, it's got Billet Pro billet rotary plates.
Yeah, it's got a Billet Pro front and rear plate. They've been black anodized. There's a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah, the car is super neat. One thing I've noticed that I think lets down a lot of these cars is when you jump inside them.
So he's gone with the original sort of theme with the race seats. So race seats so he can go to the track and just race it.
The owner's actually done a few kilometres already on this, hasn't he?
Yeah. This is done already 1500k. Yeah. So this has already been on the dyno just to do a run-in tune. So now we're just going to do more of a street power tune. Yeah. And then if he wants to take it to the track, he can still go with his street tune and it'll be fine. Once it does some laps, then we can sort of put some more boost in. First thing, we're gonna pull the tune up that's in it currently. This has already had a running tune. So we're gonna pull the information out of the Fueltech. A good thing about Fueltech, you don't need the ignition on, which is the best. It's powered by the laptop. And we get all the information out. So the first thing I do, and I wanna set all my alarms because you're tuning an engine, you want to hear the engine, and then you got to worry about watching the temperature, watching the oil pressure, you can't watch everything. So by setting up all the parameters, if it loses fuel pressure, loses oil pressure, gets too hot, the computer will automatically shut it down. So it's less things we have to worry about while we're tuning because you just can't watch everything. It's a street car, so it'll probably make about 600, 650 at the wheels. For the street.
What fuel are we on today?
Just pump E85. Yeah. But for today, we're doing all the basics and just getting through, making sure, our injectors are in the right spot. It's all been wired correctly. It's got one of the best motorsport looms in it. So a lot of the gear in it, I know, has been installed correctly, wired correctly, which is a good start. So our overboost, it's set on 16. So we've got our overboost, high EGTs, so we can enable them. We don't want to go over 900. High oil pressure, rotaries run high oil pressure, so I don't care much about that. So we've got a minimum low oil pressure at 3,500 RPM, 60 PSI. So if it gets under that, if we're over 3,500 RPM and it goes under 60 PSI, the engine will shut off. We've got low fuel pressure, but we've also got a base fuel pressure. If, say, we're running 50 PSI fuel pressure and 20 pounder boost, 1-to-1 fuel pressure regulator will go to 70 PSI. It will calculate and allow that to be within its range. And we can say to it, allow 10 PSI either way. So if it's supposed to be at 70 PSI at 20 pounder boost, but it's really at 50, well, we're 20 PSI off, it'll shut it off. It'll shut it whatever we make the difference at. And usually I've got an 8 to 10 pound difference because then we've got compensations that we can add more fuel through the lambda sensor, reading the exhaust. It'll keep putting fuel in, and then if it keeps dropping, it'll keep putting fuel in, and then it'll cut out. Either way, you can set it. If there's a parameter, if it's putting too much fuel in and you want it to shut off, you can do that as well. So a lot of safety features with the Fueltech, which is very important. Like what I was saying with the base fuel pressure, so if I enable that, but I'm going to see what the fuel pressure is. For now, I've just got it, I'm going to keep an eye on it and see what my fuel pressure is going to be. And then I can set up my base fuel pressure. We've got flex fuel corrections. Another good one with the Fueltech is the engine RPM reading error. So if we've got a crank angle sensor issue or something like that, a fault in the wiring or crank trigger, and it misses a tooth or anything like that, it will shut it off. I always put it on shut off because the problem is if it's got an error count and then it tries to read again, sometimes it reads in the wrong spot and it can hurt your engine as well. So you're better off shutting it off, finding your issue, or resetting it all and just doing some tests. We've read the ECU. Now I'm just going to write the changes that I've done. So now that's in the ECU. So if we pull it up, now if we read the ECU, it'll have our changes in there. Basically now we're going to check to make sure that the leads, coils and everything's wired correctly. So we can test that with the Fueltech. We can test the outputs, which is a really good feature. Ignition on, we can do leading one, trailing one. Being a split, so the trailing's a cleanup fuel. It's very important on a rotary to have. We're going to check them to make sure they're correct, wired, the coils are all firing, and then we're going to check the timing, and also we're going to check the injectors are in the correct position. It's a fantastic feature, especially for a tuner. You don't want to be guessing if it's correct, because on a rotary pulley, most engine builders just do top dead center. And then, so you can do your leading and trailing, but you can't see your second rotor. So this way we can make sure that they're firing correctly to the ECU. And the injectors, primary one, secondary one. Primary two, secondary two. We can check them and have a feel of them, activate them, and make sure they're firing in the correct position. Same as the boost solenoid, make sure increase, decrease is right, and that's it, and then we can start. So I'll set the timing light up. Okay, leading one, that was primary one, primary two.
What injectors are you got on this one?
Siemens Deckers. It is secondary two. It's a closed loop boost controller system. So they're increase and decrease solenoid. Obviously we're checking to make sure that they're wired correctly. So we've noticed the increase and decrease by activating them, the increase and decrease. We've got the solenoids were around the wrong way. It's hard to tell until you start testing them. So that was easy. We could just change the output. Say it was the number 7 output for increase and 8 was decrease, then we can swap them outputs around instead of rewiring, which is that's fantastic, really good, easy. And then we found the panel beaters possibly had pulled the solenoid off and disconnected the hoses and then not reconnected them correctly. Yep. So that's something that we've found that we're going to fix up.
A lot easier to fix it now though than while you're...
Oh, 100%, yeah. So that's why we do all our checking, testing. But we might find some stuff while we're tuning. We've already found something, we haven't even started the car. So we'll just keep looking and making sure everything's perfect, because one little thing can affect the whole tune-up. Yeah.
So I noticed you're not the one on the ground, Simon. Fix it.
No, I do. I will. You want me to go on the ground? And then I'm not going to look pretty for you.
I'm only joking.
I was going to get you to do it, actually.
I don't touch cars.
No? Buy an RXA, you will. That'll soon change. Just by an old log that was stored in the ECU, I'm checking the fuel pressure, and it's running about 53 PSI static. So now I can go into my setup, and my base fuel table, I'm going to enable it. As I said, it's about 53, so we can put 53 in there, and we'll allow a range of 10 PSI. Engine shut off, it's got a 10 PSI leeway, like I explained earlier. So at least now while I'm tuning it, same, if it's dropping fuel pressure, it will automatically shut the engine off. Well, this is how it should be with all these later ECUs, you know, where...
Things have changed a lot in 10 years,
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's a lot better. A lot more to learn, especially when you've got a lot of different brands out there. We like to use the Fueltech. It is simple to use, and it's as complicated as you want it to be as well. But their layout is very simple. This is all your fuel tables, your diagnostic panel. We've got all our internal data logging, when we want it to come on, when we want it to start and stop, and then automatically delete after 100%. Rev limiters, we'll just check the rev limiter. So I've had it at 5250 for him to run it in. We'll just raise that to
13,000.
Yeah, if you want, no problem. We'll just raise it to 9,000. Thermofan, we'll just check that. So it's on at 80 degrees and off at 78 degrees. I feel the ultimate for a rotary is in the mid-70s. That's where I find it happy. Maybe some other people might disagree, but in my experience, mid-70s. But they usually, it's very hard to keep them at that. But, you know, in the 80s, mid-80s is where they'll sort of tend to stay, which is good.
And this car being a manual, we've got a bit of an exotic gearbox in it. Will you be doing anything with the shifting?
This is a sequential gearbox. So that's controlled also by the Fueltech. Obviously, when you cut an engine, you don't want it to reintroduce the power mid-shift, because you can break the dogs. So there's a position sensor on it. So once it's in gear, then it will reintroduce the power, and you can adjust that as well. With rotaries, it's a bit tricky with the cut because what they call diesel. So you're running a lot of boost, a lot of fuel. It gets real hot in there, and you can cut the ignition, but the engine will still keep running. Yeah, they keep dieseling on. The computer will tell it to cut, but you won't be able to shift. So there's that fine line in the tune-up. I'm not sure on a piston motor, but I think they cut fuel as well. Rotary, definitely not. They don't like that because it's the main lubrication. Wastegate boost control, so we'll check that. We're going to have a single target value for now. Make sure that it's operating on the wastegate spring, which is usually 10 to 14 pound. And if we feel it's over boosting, there could be an issue, could be a leak, could be a leak in the boost control setup, it could be anything.
Fueltech's renowned to have very, very good boost control.
Oh yeah, it's excellent, yeah. It's got the dual two-way valve. We can activate it, control when TPS is over 50%. We don't want the boost controller coming on any lower. Maximum boost will be 30 PSI. That's what the maximum it will ever see. Two-step maximum boost, 17 pound, but the car probably wouldn't handle that. So we'll just put that on 15. So we'll go into the two-step limiter. It's set up at 8,500 RPM. It's taking out 5% fuel, which I'll just put 5% fuel in. It's always better to start with fuel in than fuel out with the two-step. We'll start at 8,000, even we could start at 7,000. It'll start compensating 1,000 RPM before. It'll put 5% fuel in. It's got a timing table for the rev launch. I like to do minus 20 degrees. So here's our engine setup. So it's a rotary engine, two rotor, maximum of 45 pound on the table. Maximum engine speed would be 12,000 RPM. RPM for engine start is 400. The main fuel table we map. I always like to have an idle map. Acceleration for fuel enrichment will be TPS. So as you stab the throttle, it's going to put more fuel in. With spark plugs, a lot of the CDI companies that build the CDIs, they want you to gap the plug, and it does work. It's just the way that the spark is delivered. Basically, yeah, we gap all the plugs.
Rotaries that can be hard on spark plugs. They can't.
Very hard, very hard. Like a two-stroke dirt bike. You know, if you're going to introduce oil and pour a lot of fuel in and a big CDI, you're going to work the plug real hard, really hard. So, and it's funny, I keep thinking to myself, the plug design is old. Like, this is probably a 30-year-old design. We've got new computers, we've got bill of plates for the cars, we've got really efficient Garrett turbochargers. I don't think anyone's brought out a new design spark plug that gives you, I don't know, lasts longer. Yeah, Iridium, they've come up with Iridium, but that's it. Yeah, like Ryco have got their new oil filters, the Syntec oil filters. So really good with the 85, methanol. There's tools for gapping plugs, but unfortunately not these design plugs.
Fueltech have a nice little...
Yeah, it doesn't work with these.
Oh, it doesn't work with this style?
Nah, doesn't work with these style of plug. Yeah, so old-fashioned way.
Back when I was at uni, Simon, I had a rotary and had no money. So you just pull the plugs out, bit of sandpaper.
Clean them up.
Clean them up, bang them back in.
Still the same. Still the same. That's what a lot of people do. You know, E85 is really good on plugs. Nicer to tune with. Engines love it. Good for the environment, apparently. So it's got a lot of bonuses. But yeah, if I tune a petrol car, I go home and I stink, it's in my pores. I'll just do a few little runs, make sure we got everything working well with the plugs that are in it, which are the run-in plugs. And then, yeah, once we're happy with all that, we'll pull them out, have a good look at them. These are a 11.5 range plug. They'll handle the most. Denso make a plug that we use as well. It's weird. Some engine combinations, some computer systems will react better to the Denzos than they will the NGKs. Yeah. Different ignition systems as well will like the Denzos over the NGKs and vice versa. We know this package sort of likes this, but you know, I could get up into the higher boost, the higher RPM and then maybe change to the Denzos. Ignition problems we're finding them more and more because the ECUs, everything's a lot more sensitive. So now we're just going to check the timing. We're going to lock the ECU and make sure that the engine is on 0 degrees, or where we want it to be. We can put it wherever we want, but 0 is where we like to have it. Okay, so basically we've set our throttle position sensor, which is a feature in the Fueltech, so the computer knows where 0 idle is and obviously 100%. We've set our ignition, so we've checked all our sensors, we've checked their inputs and outputs. All our gauges are displayed here, so we can see live, and whatever I want to put up, I can put the increase, decrease solenoid, which I won't get to. We've got our EGTs here on the side. We've got a lot of safeties. So we've got a temperature safety, we've got EGT safety, we've got oil pressure safety, we've got fuel pressure safety. So we know we can, you know, we're going to generally start looking at the AFRs, make sure it's not putting a lot of fuel in. It's actually at idle now, and we've got a target of 12.9 and it's pulling 25% out. But the engine's still cold, we're at 67 degrees. Yeah. As I said, we'll just go over the 80 degree mark. So I was at 25%, I pulled fuel out, and now we're at 10. That's really at this temperature what it's gonna like. We've still got the running plugs, so we're just gonna do some light driving, make sure everything's looking good. We'll get some logs out of it, and then just check everything. Once we're confident that everything's performing as it should, then we can start doing power runs. Well, this is a 6-speed gearbox. My 5th gear is 1-to-1. So I'll go to 5th now. So we're just loading it. Just check our mixtures. So we know it's putting about 5% in here. So what we're doing now, we're just loading it at 100 kilometers per hour, just doing some light stuff, just so we can make sure everything's looking all right. We're at 81 degrees at the moment, so temperature's good. So that's the log we just did now. We made 1 pound of boost. Our target was 12.1. It was at 11.7. The O2 correction. You can put your EGTs up, so they're pretty even. So 814, 829, they seem pretty high, but it's light load. So here I'm just checking my target table. So 1 pound, we've got 12.2. You know, I've got it pretty conservative and rich. So if I get up to 30 pound, I've got 10.3 mixtures. It's probably bit rich, but I'd rather rich. And we can start off from there, and it doesn't matter, as long as it's not popping and carrying on, the street won't see all the power that we can produce, so you might as well keep everything safe. It's just when you get to the track, even when you get to the track, you'd rather start off with everything rich and safe, because sometimes it takes a few meetings to get the car right, suspension, everything like that, so there's no use leaning on the engine. Yeah, that's something you can do in time. Alright, so our table is good, everything's good. We can give it a little power run. I mean little, just so I can check everything, and then I can pull the plugs out and we can put some fresh plugs in. I've got my air fuel ratio here as well on the dyno, which I like to have. I can't look at the dyno and also look at the mixtures. So by looking at the dyno, and I can watch my mixtures as well on the dyno. Engine temperature 78, so everything's looking good there. We got into our data log that we just did now. I went to 5,000 RPM. TPS was at 99.6, 100%. We made 11.9 pound of boost. Our target was 11.3, and it was putting fuel in. That's because it was putting it in back over here. We were pretty much almost right on target. It was going rich, if anything, which was good. Our EGTs, 716 and 739, which are good. You see how they've come down because we're pouring more fuel in. Always on a rotary, the rear gets hotter. 40 up to 50 degrees. Yeah, but we've only got 20 degrees difference. Obviously we're going to put the plugs in, duty cycle injectors. The secondaries is just sort of starting to come on. The primaries at 48%. We're only at 5,000 RPM. Fuel pressure, so we can check our fuel pressure. There's no signs of it dropping off. This car's got the best ignition system. It's got, it's got the whole package. So having the whole package, having the wiring right, having, a new engine, new ECU, having a Fueltech in it, having all the best gear in it,
You're starting off
starting on a good foot, definitely. Well, now we'll just do the plugs.
These plugs that will go in it now, are these the sort of plugs that the owner would just leave in?
Yeah. We're just going to rev it a little bit more this time.
Yeah. So what I'm asking for, it's pretty much hitting it. It is putting about 10% in. We're at about 15 pound of boost. But my target at 15 pound, my target was pretty high. The richer it is, the better when you just introduce boost, keep introducing boost. And once you get to your target boost, then you can trim it up and tune it from there. We'll rev it a bit more to make sure that the boost settles. That means we've got control over it. Because sometimes if the wastegate is not flowing enough, which this one will, because it's a Turbo Smart 1, definitely will. We know that will work. But sometimes the screamer pipe is restrictive and it won't allow it to flow out, or if you've got a restriction somewhere. So we'll make sure we've got control over the boost, then we can put boost into it. Started not lean, but it started leaning off up top, which doesn't matter up top, but yeah, and it was trying to put fuel in, so now we're going to see why. And it was only 16 pound of boost, still safe, everything's safe, but now we need to work out what was happening. We're losing fuel pressure. Like now we've got to work out why. It wasn't enough for the safety. I had it on around 10 pound, I think it was, or 9 pound. So it didn't go that much, but it started pouring. Yeah, no, definitely shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, we're at 66 pound of fuel pressure, still at 6,400 where we did the ramp before. Now we've done another ramp with a bit more RPM. We turned it to 7.1 and it's still made 468 on 16 pound. The booster's leveling out now. So we know we've got control of the boost, but our fuel pressure is dropping off. So now we've got to find the issue with the fuel pressure. Could be a pump. The pumps were probably fitted when the car got built 3 years ago. We'll have to have a look at that and see what the issue is. I'll probably be checking voltage first.
Simon, we've found one issue possibly with the low fuel pressure.
We've found a dead pump, so we've put power to them. One's working, one's not. So we're just going to replace both. The customer did admit that he ran out of fuel and couldn't work out for a while why the car wouldn't start. When he built the car, someone's obviously done a custom fuel tank when they've done all the chassis work and the roll cage and everything, and they haven't fitted him a fuel sender. So
that's an issue for another day.
Definitely, definitely. Not for today, but we'll get all the, it's a lucky we've got all the safeties and that, and we can see what's going on. And now we'll change the fuel pumps and off we go. But now the fuel pressure just stays steady. It's not dropping. It's beautiful. Fuel pressure's perfect.
Is that why it picked up a bit of power?
No, I just revved it a little bit more. I could see my mixtures were fine.
It was all right.
Yeah. My mixtures were spot on. So I want to adjust my fuel table, just put some more fuel in it. I can overlay it and I can see where it wanted fuel. I can do the primaries or secondaries. It's the best feature. To hit its target, it needed another 9% of fuel. Our primaries are at 77% and the secondaries are at 40%. So I'm going to put in the secondaries. Now it's only putting 3% compared to the 9%. I'll put another 10% of fuel and I'll keep putting more fuel in.
So when you're saying 3%,
the computer
is compensating 3%.
It's putting 3% of fuel in to hit my target. Target being the purple line here. And as we start getting into the power, my actual closed loop mixtures, which are wrapping around the target, which is perfect. So as I'm tuning, I know I'm within that window. Our EGTs are 14 degrees different, a maximum of 830.
Horsepower. That's exactly
and
what
I said to the customer, we'll go around that sort of between 600 and 650.
Yep.
At least he can get out there and enjoy it. And if there is any other niggly little issues like what we've come across today, there's no use pushing it to its limit and then finding that issue. This is only part of the tune. A lot of it, this will make the power and everything like that.
Yeah.
And we'll set up the drivability will be there. But we do a lot of road tuning as well. So it's nice to go around the streets, drive it, not for the power side of it, but more for the drivability coming out of corners. I might have a rich spot or a lean spot or something like that.
Realistically,
and we just find it out.
That's 95% of your driving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's not going to be up there. The most important part for over 40 is you need glasses. Me and Lena used to be movie stars 30 years ago. Sound like a welder, these injectors. So it's a better quality fuel. See you later. And we just lost power.
Someone's used the toaster and the microwave at the same time by the looks of it.
And we're back.
That's a nice...
Paulie, get off the toilet, Paulie!